It's time for Northwestern Outdoors Radio, the award-winning show that covers fishing, hunting, and all sorts of outdoor recreation here in the Great Northwest. Northwestern Outdoors is brought to you every week by Mack's Lure Company, a legacy of innovation since 1969, by Loophole Optics, America's optical authority, by Camp Chef, the way to cook outdoors,
by Wallowa County.
Nature is on display in Northeast Oregon, and by The Real News, your fishing resource. Also by Shiloh Inns and Suites, providing you with affordable excellence. And by Mardon Resort, the place for fishing, hunting, and more in Eastern Washington. And now, it's time to head outside with your host, John Cruz.
The Northwest has been burning up this summer. Washington and Oregon have both declared a state of emergency due to the wildfires and threats of more of them. Central Washington residents are already getting weary of fires, having been through several of them since June, and now is when fire season is normally just getting started. Things aren't much better in southern Oregon or north central Oregon or in Idaho's Boise National Forest, which has also seen its fair share and more of fire activity. In Montana, firefighters are on edge, and it doesn't help. Some careless campers at places like Lake Como in the Bitterroot Valley are just walking away from their campfires, which is an invitation to a blaze. We've said it before, we'll say it again. Be careful out there. Be responsible. Drown those campfires. Don't discard cigarettes out those car windows or throw them in the dry grass. And just please help us keep the Northwest green and help keep our firefighters safe by not starting those fires they have to fight. This week on the show, we'll be talking about staying safe and what you can do so you, that's right, you, don't become the subject of a search and rescue operation when we talk to Sheriff Glenn Palmer from Grant County, Oregon, about his county's search and rescue team and some of the call-outs they've had to deal with. Bob Loomis with Mack's Lure Company joins us to talk about catching sockeye in a couple of north central Washington lakes, Lake Osoyoos and Lake Wenatchee this summer on an extended Mack's Minute. And then we broach the subject of lawsuits targeting hatchery operations in the Northwest. Rob Masonis with Trout Unlimited weighs in on the subject of hatchery versus wild steelhead, and I think you'll find what he has to say is pretty interesting. I'm guessing half our listeners will agree with it and half won't, but it's a well-formed opinion on this controversial subject you're going to want to hear. In outdoor news, we tell you about drone airplanes you may see flying over forest fires in the Northwest and about some Montana waters you can fish right now and take home as many trout as you want. You'll also have a chance to enter a waterfowl art contest and maybe have your art grace the Oregon Duck Stamp next year. And if you live in Idaho, you might want to weigh in with your opinion about the upcoming sage grouse season because fish and game officials in the Gem State want to hear it. Throw in some cool upcoming events and audio about a clever new accessory for you anglers called the bait button, and I think you're really going to enjoy this week's edition of Northwestern Outdoors. However, before we get any further into this, we've got another edition of Sportsman Spotlight for you, brought to you every week by Shiloh Inn and Suites, the chain with the motto of affordable excellence. This time, David Sparks takes us a little ways out of the Northwest to Utah's Heber Valley for some first-rate trout fishing.
Heber Valley reminder, David Sparks, Sportsman Spotlight. If you missed the story on trout fishing that I did last week, I want to repeat a little bit of it with Julie Zicka, who owns Fall River Fly Rods with her husband. I met Julie at a sportsman show about a year ago, and they were showing off some beautiful bamboo fly rods. Well, they recently moved to the Heber Valley in Utah, and Julie claims that it is some of the best trout fishing in the entire United States.
We are lucky enough to have the middle and lower Provo River running through the Heber Valley, and especially the middle Provo River has gotten to the point in the last decade where it's established itself pretty well as it's one of the top trout fisheries in the U.S. now, the middle Provo River. Pretty amazing fly fishing here. We have rainbow trout, we have brown trout, especially is probably what people come here most for. I think you can see some cuts here, a little bit of everything. Fish sizes anywhere from 14 to 16 inches on up to 26-inch fish easily in the Provo. And the nice thing about the Provo, one of the things that makes it so wonderful is that there's about 3,000 fish per mile flowing through. So, yeah.
How is Fall River Fly Rods doing?
Being here has actually been a wonderful move for us. The area the people that live in the area are able to easily afford some of the fly rods that we sell. And we just get a lot of transient visitors that come through.
This is David Sparks for Sportsman Spotlight.
Confused by so many national brand hotel reward programs? Blackout dates, expiration dates, different points for different hotel rewards, and gimmicks? At Shiloh Inn Suites Hotels, it's simple. No blackout dates for any rewards stay. If we have a room available, it's yours. Hi, I'm Mark Hemstreet, owner of Shiloh Inns. As a rewards member, you'll receive free room upgrades, a dedicated personal agent to help book your stay, points that don't expire, points that can be used for free nights at any one of our beautiful hotels or donations to your local school or free airline tickets, and much more. And as a special bonus, you'll earn 100 free bonus points just for signing up. From your very first stay, you receive free Wi-Fi, free breakfast at most locations. The kids stay free. We don't charge ridiculous resort or parking fees, and we're dog-friendly. Shiloh Inns, affordable excellence. American-owned and proud of it.
From the Columbia River to Puget Sound, the Coastal Conservation Association in the Pacific Northwest works to conserve the fish we love and does so while protecting our heritage of sport fishing. To find out more, go to ccapnw.org. Again, that's ccapnw.org.
Welcome back to Northwestern Outdoors Radio. I'm John Cruz, and this is the time of year a lot of people are heading out into the woods, into the mountains, and out into the rivers and lakes to play, but sometimes people get into trouble. And when they do, somebody calls 911, and in a lot of cases, a search and rescue team is on their way to help you. Well, we're talking to a guy who knows all about this. It's Glenn Palmer. He's the sheriff of Grant County in north central Oregon around Canyon City and John Day. Welcome to the show, Glenn.
Pleasure to be here, John. Thanks for having me.
Glenn, I know that this is a really busy time of year for you. You know, you cover a lot of ground, portions of the Malheur National Forest, the southern end of the Blue Mountains, and, of course, the John Day River. Tell me about the Grant County Search and Rescue Team, because you have a very small sheriff's office, and I think this is typical of a lot of Northwest counties in Idaho and Montana and Washington and Oregon. What are your assets? What do you have available?
We're almost totally dependent upon volunteers. We've got myself and 3 patrol staff that if we need them to go out on the searches, we can utilize our paid staff. We have what's called the Grant County Air Search, and they are private pilots that use their own aircraft. The state of Oregon reimburses for their fuel. All their training and all their time that they put into this is out of pocket, and part of their, I believe it's a 501c3 organization that they manage and they run. And we've also got the Grant County Snowballers. We do over the snow search and rescue type activities. Grant County is the place in eastern Oregon that has the most groomed snowmobile trails in the entire state of Oregon, and we do get some activity. In fact, a couple of years ago, we hooked a gooseneck trailer up to the back of a snow groomer, and we ended up doing a cattle rescue, believe it or not.
Oh, jeez.
And that was by volunteer assistance and with the Oregon State Snowmobile Association. We also have an equestrian or our horse group that strictly volunteer, that if we need them to ride in somewhere or do an extended search that goes beyond maybe day 2 or 3 to where we need to expand the search area, then we can call on them. And if our ground pounders are starting to wear thin, then maybe we can put our horse people to work. But volunteers are a huge asset to us, and without them, we couldn't do what we do.
Well, and again, I think there's a lot of sheriffs in the Northwest, especially in the rural counties where a lot of people like to go recreate, that basically have the same situation that you do, that are relying on volunteers. So kudos to all of you out there who are serving in this capacity. Let's talk about staying out of trouble. What are some of the biggest mistakes you see folks make that leads to your team getting activated? And we'll start off with land rescues.
Well, John, some of the stuff that comes in, and it just is a basic lack of communication between the person that's gone out into our public lands or out onto the forest, or they've gone for a drive somewhere. And we don't know when we get the call if they've gone north, south, east, or west. And typically in the spring of the year, it starts with people wanting to get out into the hills. They get a little bit of cabin fever, and they end up trying to bust a snowdrift or something, and they get stranded, and they're 8, 10, 15 miles. And, of course, down here in the valley, it gets up into the 70s, and they're wearing shorts and flip-flops, and they don't have clothes. But up higher, they're still seeing temperatures up into the high 20s, low 30-degree temperature, and they don't have the food and the clothing and the ability to care for themselves. And it ends up turning into an emergency for us. And
sure.
if they would just, leave a note with somebody and tell them, hey, I'm going for a drive and this is where I'm going, and if I'm not back by 9 o'clock, I'll call you in. It just basically communicate what you're going to do, and it would help us tremendously, and it would get, maybe if you are stuck or stranded, it would give us a starting point or a jump-off point, so to say, that we can actually go looking for you instead of, our county here is just under 5,000 square miles, and for us to begin looking for you, it becomes a challenge and it becomes expensive for the taxpayer. So,
absolutely,
that's one of our biggest things. But we do have our other things where people do have medical emergencies and things that people they don't plan and they don't expect these things to happen. And unfortunately, we try our hardest and we do our best to try and locate these people and get them recovered. But sometimes it does become a recovery instead of a rescue.
No, that's a fact. When it comes to search and rescue, it does become search and recovery in all too many cases. And folks, 2 things to take away there. Number 1, again, communicate. Let people know where you're going, when you expect to be back. And number 2, be prepared for the elements. I think it was great you brought up that exact scenario about the shorts and the flip-flops. You go up in an area where you ought to be wearing a sweater and a rain parka, and you see this time and time again. Folks, again, you're listening to Northwestern Outdoors Radio. We're talking to Glenn Palmer. He's the sheriff of Grant County in north central Oregon. We're talking search and rescue. So we just talked about things that people do that cause you to get activated for land rescues. What about water rescues? What are some of the things that people do that cause you to get activated for water rescues, like on places like the John Day River?
Well, John, the thing that we've been seeing are mainly along the rivers are motor vehicle crashes. It's hard to prepare for those, but about 2 to 3 years ago, we had an elderly gentleman end up in the river, and it was during flood stage. And to be honest with you and your listeners, we floundered pretty hard.
Mm-hmm.
And we've geared up, and we've got a couple of us trained up for swiftwater rescue, and it was actually a pretty interesting class. I learned quite a bit on how to enter the river and how to get out, plus how to get somebody else out of the river. And we've got a couple more people to go through the training here in the office, but when we bring the training here, we're going to invite it for a regional type training, and we're still in the beginning stages of our swiftwater stuff. But we do have Magoon Lake in the north central part of our county, and the thing up there, we usually get a call or 2 a year up there that people try to swim out to the middle of a lake where there's a log that's partially submerged, and some people get out and make it halfway and end up going under and not making it.
Right.
Right. One of the things that I would like to stress for people is, we're seeing a lot more swiftwater rubber rafting and kayaking and canoes and things like that. And, it's very imperative that people put on their life jackets and wear them. And the other thing that I would like people to consider, they make some pretty stylish helmets. And if you could imagine yourself getting kicked out of your boat or your raft, and what's on the bottom of the river is going to come and connect with your head. And, a helmet, they're kind of a cumbersome thing, but if you'd wear one riding a motorcycle or an ATV, I'd consider that you wear one when you're whitewater rafting and in the river, around the river. You slip and fall and do things like that, and you become part of the problem and not part of the solution.
Well, Sheriff, that's some great advice, and frankly, I think a lot of people had not even considered wearing the helmets except in like Class 4, Class 5 waters. So great advice there. Before we go, do you have some advice for folks who plan on recreating in the backcountry so they don't end up getting in trouble? We've already covered some of this, but any parting shots, so to speak?
You know what? I just ask people to be mentally and physically prepared. A lot of people have the mindset that, wow, I never thought this would happen to me. I don't know anybody that went into the wilderness or went into the backwoods on a hunting trip and thought, I'm going to go out and get myself hurt or lost or turned around or injured. So have the mindset that it can happen to you. And my motto here at the Sheriff's Office in Grant County is, if you can get yourself into the woods, are you able to get yourself out? Do you have the right electronic equipment? Do you know how to use it? Does somebody know where you're going? Are you familiar with the terrain and the country? Just physically and mentally prepare yourself to help us out by being able to get yourself out of the woods.
Well, there you go, folks. Some great advice from Glenn Palmer, the sheriff of Grant County in north central Oregon, about staying safe and staying out of trouble so you don't need to be rescued by a search and rescue team. We're going to wrap up by directing you to the Grant County Sheriff's Office website. Really easy one, GrantCountySheriffOregon.com. That's GrantCountySheriffOregon.com. And if you want to find out about recreational opportunities in Grant County near John Day, there's a bunch of them to be had. Go to GCOregonLive.com. That's GCOregonLive.com to find out about outdoor recreation in north central Oregon. Sheriff, thanks so much for giving us this great information, and thanks so much for what you do. We appreciate it.
Thank you, John. It's good visiting with you.
Great information from Sheriff Glenn Palmer there. Another takeaway I want to give you here, when it comes to these rural counties, when it comes to these sheriff's offices that rely on volunteers, you're going to be on your own for a while. And Sheriff Palmer talked about being mentally and physically prepared. That also means being prepared clothing and equipment-wise. You might have to rely on your own wits and your own devices before help gets to you. Help will be on the way, but it's not going to be there instantaneously. It's not like the movies where you pick up the cell phone and a minute later the chopper flies over the hill and you're rescued. You might be there for hours, maybe even a couple of days in worst case scenarios when it comes to recreating here in the Northwest before help comes your way. So be prepared. Don't forget the 10 essentials, and be safe out there in the backcountry and on our Northwest waters.
At Shiloh Inn Suites Hotels, 4-star accommodations come with something else you'll really appreciate: affordability. Hello, I'm Mark Hemstreet, owner of Shiloh Inns. Relax in Shiloh's beautiful deluxe smoke-free suites. Enjoy Shiloh's spacious pools, spas, steam, and sauna rooms. At Shiloh Inn Suites Hotels, we're making 4-star excellence affordable with more free amenities than most any other hotel chains. For reservations, call 1-800-222-2244 or visit our website at shilohins.com. Shiloh Inns, affordable excellence.
We're back with John Cruz on Northwestern Outdoors Radio.
It's time for another Mack's Minute. Fish on! Brought to you every week by Mack's Lure Company. With us here again, Bobby Loomis with Mack's Lure Company. Bobby, we're up here again on the Upper Columbia River. We're fishing for sockeye salmon, but we need to talk about a couple of other nearby fisheries up here in north central Washington. Lake Wenatchee, that's over, basically in the Cascade Mountains, not far from US 2, and Lake Osoyoos, right up by the Canadian border in Oroville. These fisheries are going to be going on late July through August. How are people going to be catching fish here?
They're going to be doing the same thing. They're going to be trolling dodgers along with squidders or hooks with beads on them, smile blades on them, different types of spinner type products in order to entice those fish to bite.
At least on Lake Wenatchee, you can't use bait. Can you still catch fish even if you don't have that coon shrimp that we are using here on the Columbia?
Absolutely. I mean, for years we fished nothing but a dodger with a pair of red hooks, and that's what really enticed them. We did find, though, like up at Lake Wenatchee, fishing with the squidders and smile blades, that it really, really helped.
Do you expect this same tactic to work at Lake Osoyoos?
Absolutely. They finally got a sockeye season this year, which is fantastic, considering that's where these fish, everything's coming through up there. And, you fish them the exact same way.
So there you go, folks. Some great tips to help you go ahead and get into sockeye both at Lake Wenatchee and Lake Osoyoos this summer. Go ahead and find the products you need to be successful at maxlure.com or at your local sporting goods store. And don't wait. Bobby, thanks for telling us all about it.
Thank you, John.
Looking for the ultimate cooking machine for your backyard or patio? Look no further than Camp Chef's new pellet grill and smoker. With user-friendly features like an auto ignition, digital readouts, and internal meat temperature sensors, it's easy to smoke the tastiest salmon, ribs, brisket, and turkey you'll ever eat. And an innovative system makes cleanup a snap. Everyone will want the food you're cooking on your Camp Chef pellet grill and smoker. The quality smoker that's second to none. Find out more at campchef.com. Camp Chef, the way to cook outdoors.
Hot summer nights mean hot morning fishing for sockeye here in the Northwest, and Mack's Lure Company has got what you need to catch a limit with the Double D Dodger and 2 great sockeye rigs. The Double D Dodger has a unique fast, slow action and can be fished away from the boat without a side planer. The Cha-Cha Sockeye Rig and Double Whammy Sockeye Pro both feature a patented smile blade and 2 stout red hooks that won't let go of that salmon when it bites. Mack's Lure Company, getting you into the sockeye this summer.
You demand quality performance from your binoculars, whether you use them in the field, on the water, or at a stadium. But you don't want to spend a fortune. That's where the BX McKenzie binoculars from Leupold come in. These armored, waterproof binoculars are both comfortable and dependable. Look for your McKenzie binoculars at quality sporting goods retailers near you, to include your Cabela's, Sportsman's Warehouse, or Northwest Bi-Mart stores. BX McKenzie, bringing your world into sharper focus, only from Leupold.
This is Commissioner of Public Lands Peter Goldmark. Whether you live on the west or east side of the Cascades, dry weather means greater risk of wildfire. Please respect burn bans and completely put out campfires. Get more information at dnr.wa.gov.
Welcome back to Northwestern Outdoors Radio. Big problems brewing for salmon and steelhead anglers here in the Northwest. If you haven't heard, the Wild Fish Conservancy has filed another lawsuit, this time against the Leavenworth Fish Hatchery in Central Washington over their long-running spring Chinook operation that has provided anglers a consistent fishery on the Icicle River for years. With us here to go ahead and weigh in on the subject is Rob Masonis. He's the Vice President for Western Conservation at Trout Unlimited. And Rob has spent 20 years working on river and fish conservation in the Northwest and oversees all of this national organization's conservation programs in the Western United States. Rob, welcome to the show.
Hi, John. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, Rob, like I said, big battle that's starting to brew here in the Northwest between anglers who want to catch and keep steelhead and salmon, primarily hatchery fish, and other anglers who passionately believe hatchery, steelhead, and salmon are harmful to our streams. As you're probably aware, recent litigation by the Wild Fish Conservancy in Washington State resulted in only 180,000 juvenile hatchery steelhead being released into a Puget Sound river instead of a planned release of 900,000 smolt to several rivers. The same group is now filing another action against Leavenworth Fish Hatchery. There's been similar actions filed in court regarding the Mackenzie River hatchery operations, regarding the Sandy River hatchery operations. Where does Trout Unlimited stand on this issue?
Yeah, well, I appreciate the question. I think I would start by saying I don't see the battle being the battle that you described. I think the battle that we're confronting is between failed status quo fish management. I'm most familiar with the steelhead issue here in Washington State, and a new approach to fish management that is informed by data and science and serves both conservation and fishing better than the status quo. I think that's the way that this issue should be framed and discussed.
You know, it's difficult, though, to frame it in that context. I understand, and you understand, there are certain river systems that are not doing well at all. And I think the Puget Sound rivers in particular fit under that category. But if you look at the Columbia River, we've had record run after near record run after record run of salmon and steelhead coming upstream for several years now. And anglers are probably thinking, why is this happening? Why are people filing suit to go ahead and stop us from fishing and keeping fish?
Yeah, well, I don't think people are filing suit to stop people from fishing. I think they're trying to, I can't speak for Wild Fish Conservancy, but I think what they're trying to do is to force some changes in hatchery operations that are undermining wild fish productivity. And one of the struggles, I think, in this debate is it's easy to talk about hatchery versus wild fish in generalities.
Sure.
And I would submit that will just just lead people to argue and not come to any positive solutions. I think what we need to be doing is talking about hatcheries, specific hatchery operations, specific river basins with respect to specific species and population. Because what all of the kind of blue ribbon independent science groups that are looking at these issues are saying is that you need to look at it with those specifics in mind, and you need to be considering hatchery operations in an ecological landscape context. And that's what we should be doing. I understand that people are passionate. I'm a passionate angler myself, and we don't want to lose fishing opportunities. But I think it's in the case, for example, the Chambers Creek winter steelhead plans on the Skagit River, it's hard to look at the last 40 years of data where as more smolts, hatchery smolts were put in the river, fewer wild and hatchery adults came back. Fishing opportunity has declined precipitously. And it's cost the state a fair amount of money. I just did some calculations before, and between 1994 and 2007, it cost the state $6 million. So we shouldn't be arguing, I think, about a system that by any objective analysis has failed, both fishermen and conservation. We should be looking at ways to achieve both, because I think productive wild populations will assist fisheries, will aid fisheries, and over time.
So, Rob, let me back up a step here because, you mentioned, the fish on the Skagit River that were being released and they came from a certain genetic stock. And one thing I'm starting to pick up here, is it true that certain hatchery fish, in terms of certain genetic stocks, are worse than others?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there are what we know, and a lot of this information has really come to light in the last decade or so, is that the stocks that you choose to seed hatcheries are very important. We're moving away from the old system where we used to use out-of-basin broodstock like Chambers Creek and plant them all over the state of Washington for winter steelhead, and moving more toward local broodstock to reduce the level of genetic impact. Now, there's problems, and you can get into the weeds very quickly in talking about this stuff. It's not that the local broodstock is a panacea, because even in those systems where there are hatcheries using local broodstock, we're seeing significant negative effects. So, but yes, the answer to your question is there are certain hatchery programs, like the Chambers Creek program, that have just performed terribly. And they perform terribly not only at the expense of conservation for wild populations, but also for fishermen. They have not been producing good fishing seasons in Washington State.
So, and I agree with certain rivers in Washington State, that's true. In other rivers, I think hatchery production has been helpful. We recently had Lance Fisher. He's a well-known outdoors radio host from Portland, and he's a producer of a documentary called Hatchery and Wild. He was on our show, and Lance's documentary basically drives home the point that hatchery fish and wild fish, if properly managed, can coexist and even thrive in Northwest streams. Is this something that you and Trout Unlimited can find common ground with?
I think that Lance and I could find common ground if we sat down and talked about specific rivers and specific hatchery populations and specific populations. Again, the problem is that you can't talk about these issues at that level of generality. I don't agree with the statement that wild fish and hatcheries can coexist in every river for every species. That is just not the level at which you can analyze and make informed decisions. I do think that there are some cases where hatcheries make sense. I would point to something like the captive brood program for Idaho's Snake River sockeye.
Sure.
Where you had a population that was essentially extirpated, and you're trying to rebuild that population. There is a use for hatcheries if we're doing reintroduction to areas of the basin where we've lost fish, say due to impassable barriers that we've built. So I think there are uses for hatcheries, but I think that the notion that fishing has to be driven or should be driven by hatchery operations, and that wild population recovery is somehow at odds with that, I don't think that's true in a lot of river basins, and I think we need to sit down and talk about the details.
Rob, we're starting to run out of time here, but before we go, if TU had a magic wand to make everything better here in the Northwest, what's the vision you see? How would things work out in terms of increasing wild steelhead, and whether or not hatcheries have a place in that?
Our vision at TU is to take full advantage of the habitat that we have to produce wild fish and to rebuild wild steelhead populations that we can fish on. Now, I will say that I don't think every river in the Pacific Northwest you can do that on because of habitat degradation, where it's so severe. There may be, you may not be able to recover those populations, and in those cases we may want to consider a hatchery in order to enable fishing to go forward. But the future that I envision is where we do have systems like the Skagit River in Washington with a lot of habitat that could support a fishable, robust wild steelhead population. That should be our focus. And we should be removing impediments to that, such as the Chambers Creek hatchery program, which, as I said before, is a proven failure. The data doesn't lie, and you can't look at that information and say, hey, this is helping fishermen and helping conservation.
Rob, I wish we had more time because I know we are just scratching the surface. I think we're going to have you back to talk more about this subject. If you want to find out more, though, about Trout Unlimited, they are, well, you might say they're the leaders in cold water conservation here in the United States. Simple website to check them out. It's tu.org. That's tu.org for Trout Unlimited. Rob, thanks for coming on and weighing in on this issue. We sure appreciate your time.
Appreciate it, John. Take care.
Leupold has been building optics in Oregon since 1907, and Leupold binoculars bring excellent optical performance and modern styling to the serious outdoorsman. Whether you're a boater, birder, backpacker, or hunter, Leupold's state-of-the-art binocular lines are sure to fit your needs. Visit Leupold.com or your local Cabela's, Bi-Mart, or Sportsman's Warehouse to see the full line of Leupold optics.
With an Evinrude motor and Minn Kota troller and Lowrance fish finder or two.
Welcome back to Northwestern Outdoors Radio. It's time again for news and reports from the field, brought to you every week by Mardon Resort at Potholes Reservoir in eastern Washington. If you're looking for something to do in August, well, consider heading over to the resort on August 23rd. That's when the lake games are going on, and there's going to be all sorts of things taking place, but two things are for sure. Number one, there's going to be a poker run on the lake for you boaters. That's always tons of fun. And there's going to be one heck of a party. So if you want to go have fun in the sun at the lake, head on over to Mardon Resort, and don't forget your fishing pole, because the fishing has been hot for boaters on the lake and for kids and adults alike right off the dock. That's Mardon Resort, where the fish bite, but we don't. Find out more at mardonresort.com. Wildfires have been burning a big swath of forest and sage across Oregon, Washington, and Idaho the last few weeks, and the Washington Department of Natural Resources has deployed a new tool to help, at least in Washington state, a drone aircraft. The state got permission to use the unmanned aerial vehicle from the FAA for wildfire monitoring and is putting it to good use this summer. Peter Goldmark, Commissioner of Public Lands, said in a press release, use of a UAV can help get real-time information to firefighters on the ground. Just over the last few days, we've seen more than 100 fire starts in Washington. Additional information can provide a safer operating environment for firefighters. The press release goes on to say the DNR regularly uses airplanes and helicopters to monitor and control wildfires, but wind and smoke can ground those aircraft. A UAV, on the other hand, can fly in conditions where manned aircraft cannot and relay video information that helps fire suppression efforts. In Idaho, the Fish and Game Commission wants to hear from you before they decide on regulations for the upcoming sage grouse hunting season. As you probably know, sage grouse are being considered as candidates for a federal endangered species listing, but in Idaho, Fish and Game officials believe the populations are healthy enough to offer some restrictive hunting opportunities. There are two options on the table. The first is no change from last year, which means a 7-day season from September 20th through the 26th with a 1-bird daily bag limit. The second option on the table maintains that, but would add a new closure in 4 eastern Idaho counties because male breeding activity in this area declined by 53% since 2011. If you have an opinion about sage grouse hunting in Idaho for this year, you can express it during an open house being held at the Idaho Fish and Game Office in Pocatello between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. on July 28th, or submit your comments online through the Fish and Game website until August 5th. In Montana, limits have been lifted at several waters that are scheduled for rehabilitation later this year in an effort to restore native cutthroat trout. Camas Lake, west of White Sulphur Springs in the Helena National Forest, is open for an unlimited harvest of non-native Yellowstone cutthroat until August 3rd, as is Elkhorn Creek within the Beartooth Wildlife Management Area, where they would like you to catch and keep hybrid cut bows through August 15th. Cussler Lake in the South Fork of the Flathead River drainage also has no limits for hybrid trout through August 31st. In other words, get those trout rods out, folks, and plan on taking home some trout for dinner. Finally, do you like to paint pictures of ducks and geese? Well, if you do, and you're good at it, you may want to enter a waterfowl art competition open now from November 7th. The winner will win $3,000 and have their art featured on the 2015 Oregon State Duck Stamp. This is actually the first time there's been an open competition for 20 years because the artwork for the stamp was contracted out to a single artist over the last 2 decades. However, that contract has ended, and now it's open to everybody. For more information, contact Kelly Walton at the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife in Salem, or go online to the ODFW website for details. On Washington's Olympic Peninsula, Lake Quinault is again open for summer fun. Lake activities were closed in the spring of 2013 for a number of reasons, but the lake is now reopened, and visitors to the historic Lake Quinault Lodge can now swim, fish, or rent a boat like a kayak, canoe, or even a rowboat to check out the lake. There's also guided boat tours available that take you around the lake to see waterfalls, some huge record-breaking trees, and a wide variety of wildlife. The boat rentals are available through October, weather permitting, and the boat tours run until mid-September 3 times a day. Find out more at olympicnationalparks.com. Next, we're bringing you some audio we recorded way back in February at the big sportsman show in Portland about something you're going to want to use on your hook to catch more fish.
You're back with Northwestern Outdoors Radio, and once again, we're bringing you innovative products that we're finding at sportsman shows around the Northwest. This one's from the Pacific Northwest Sportsman Show in Portland. Let me go ahead and tell you a problem that as an angler you're probably very familiar with. If you've ever fished salmon eggs under a spinning glow, you've probably had those salmon eggs slip down on the shank of the hook and then fall off. If you've ever fished a potski egg on an egg hook, same situation. How about a plastic worm or a grub or a jig? Have you ever had that slip down the shank? I know I have. Even a little teeny grub on a crappie jig. It's a problem trying to keep it in place. Well, there's a company that's found a solution to that. It's called Bait Buttons. It's a product made in the USA. And with us here to tell us more is the founder and owner, Bill Schmunk. Bill, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. Glad to be able to tell you about the Bait Button and what it does.
Bill, why don't you go ahead and just give us a quick demonstration of how this works, how these stoppers basically go on the hook to keep the bait or keep the presentation in place.
Well, what we have is a dispenser that holds these bait buttons in. So when you're trolling with a night crawler or you have a plastic pink worm for steelhead, that worm wants to keep sliding back on the bend of the hook. So what we do is we have a bait button that comes down into the loading zone on the dispenser. You swipe the hook through the loading zone, puts it on the hook, and then you slide it up tight against your bait. That way you keep a natural presentation all the time, and it takes literally 2 seconds to do. If you're having problems, say, and you're using fish pills or puff balls on your steelhead, and it's always falling back into the bend of the hook, getting in the way of the set and so on, put your bait together, your roe and your yarn and your fish pill on there, and then again, swipe through the dispenser with the hook. It puts the bait button on there. You slide that up tight. It eliminates that movement of the bait, and you always have a perfect natural appearing bait, drift after drift after drift.
It's a great concept. And again, this being radio, I've got to try to go ahead and describe this the best I can. So let's go ahead and think of this dispenser. Think of it as a Pez dispenser, if you will, except the Pez dispenser is not spitting out candy. It's basically spitting out a stop onto the hook itself, and you just slide that stop right up to the presentation, whether it's plastic, whether it's bait, to go ahead and keep it in place. Now, you've got two different ones. You've got a bright green one. You've got an orange one. What's the difference between the two?
The green dispenser has a smaller size bait button in it, which is good up to about a 4/0 hook size. The orange dispenser contains what we call our big game bait button, and it is used for larger baits and hooks up to 10/0.
So basically, when it comes to color, it's all about size. Now, the smaller ones, I'm assuming, hold more of the stops than the larger ones do.
That's correct. The smaller size, there's 100 of those that come preloaded in the dispenser. With the big game, there are 25 preloaded in the dispenser.
You know, these dispensers, they're very small. They fit right in the palm of your hand. They're plastic. They're durable. You can put them in a pocket of your shirt. You can put them in your fishing vest. If you've got some sort of elastic cord, you can just go ahead and use it that way. Very convenient to use. The next question I got to ask, where can people find them so they can try them out? Because I think people are really going to like this product.
Yeah, they're really getting popular. A lot of the guides are using them now, and actually it's kind of starting to go across the U.S. You can always get them online at baitbuttons.com. You can get them at Sportsman's Warehouse, Fisherman's Marine, Bass Pro Shops, and other bait and tackle stores.
Well, there you go. Fisherman's Marine all over the Portland area. Bass Pro Shops, very well known. Sportsman's Warehouse all over the West. And again, Bait baitbuttons.com, and maybe that should be your first stop so you can get a visual of exactly what this looks like and even more information on what it does. It's baitbuttons.com. It's the bait button, really innovative idea, and I think this is going to change the way you fish. Thanks for telling us all about it on Northwestern Outdoors Radio.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
With musky spinners and lures. Oh, honey, I love you, and that's not a lie. Musky guides all tell the truth. This must be the reason why I miss fishing more than I miss you.
Are you ready for some real adventure? Then wake up to winter in Wallowa County. Grab your camera, put on your snowshoes, and take a professionally guided hike into the quiet solitude and breathtakingly rugged beauty of the Eagle Cap Wilderness. Or sleep under the stars and test your mettle with some winter camping and ice fishing for kokanee and trout at Wallowa Lake. Or bring your snowmobile to Salt Creek Summit and explore Wallowa County on 150 miles of Northeast Oregon's best trails. Your outdoor winter adventure begins at www.wallawacountychamber.com.
I'd like to tell you I just brought down that buck, but I didn't. I missed. And you know why I missed? Because of the scope I've got on my rifle. You see, my friends told me to get a Leupold rifle scope. Why? Well, because Leupold is America's optical authority. They make a huge variety of quality scopes for every need, and they make them right here in the Northwest. Unfortunately, I didn't listen. I used the cheap scope that came with this rifle when I bought it. And when it came time to pull the trigger, well, let's just say things were a little blurry. Now, I've got nothing to look forward to except a long, empty-handed walk back home. Next time I come out into the field, there's going to be a Leupold scope on my rifle. And next time, I'm not going to miss.
Leupold rifle scopes. Check out the whole line at leupold.com and look for them at a sporting goods store near you.
We're back with one last cast from John Cruz on Northwestern Outdoors Radio.
Let's run through some upcoming events before we go. We'd like to remind you again about that Camp Make a Dream Walleye Benefit coming up soon at Montana's Canyon Ferry Reservoir. This is a laid-back one-day fishing derby taking place on August 2nd, and all the proceeds go to Camp Make a Dream, a special place that's a working ranch near Gold Creek, Montana, where kids and women battling cancer can get away and enjoy big sky country outdoors. You can find out more about this event by going to cmadbenefit.bigskyOutdoors.net. I'll repeat that. It's cmadbenefit.bigskyOutdoors.net. In Washington, there are several salmon derbies coming up in Puget Sound the next few weeks, all part of the Northwest Salmon Derby Series. The South King County Puget Sound anglers will put on their derby August 2nd at Point Defiance. A similar derby will take place on the 9th around Gig Harbor, and on the 16th, you can head to the South Sound near Olympia to fish and perhaps win. Find out more at NorthwestSalmonDerbySeries.com. A lot of people don't like Mondays, but this Monday, the 28th, is a good day to visit Oregon State Parks, especially if you are looking for some unique activities to take part in. There's a free guided 1-hour tide pool walk taking place at Ecola State Park near Cannon Beach at 8 a.m., a 2.5-hour guided kayak trip suitable for beginners and only costing $20 that's taking place at Brian Booth State Park, formerly known as Beaver Creek State Natural Area, north of Waldport. That one kicks off at 8:30 a.m., and there's a guided canoe tour of Estacada Lake, east of Oregon City, also suitable for beginners. It starts at 6 p.m. at Milo McIver Park. This one costs $15, and pre-registration is required. Find out more about all three of these events and a lot of other ones at OregonStateParks.org, and just go to the events page. If you're into culture and fun, consider heading to Fort Hall in Idaho between the 7th and 10th of August to check out the 51st Annual Shoshone-Bannock Powwow taking place there. There's going to be dancing, there's going to be drumming, there's going to be parades, Indian relay races, and lots of rodeo to take in too. Find out more at sbtribes.com/festival. That's sbtribes.com/festival.
northwesternoutdoors.com/festival. While you're on the web, check out our webpage too. It's northwesternoutdoors.com. You'll find links to find out more about our guests, previews of the upcoming show, and audio from last week's show. That's northwesternoutdoors.com. We're also on Facebook. Go ahead and like us and follow us at Northwestern Outdoors Radio. We're always posting information that doesn't necessarily make the news because of time requirements or just because we have so much to share with you every week. That, by the way, is all for this week. It's been hot out there, but then again, so has the fishing, so grab that fishing pole, and until next time, take care, God bless, and make it a point to spend some time outdoors.